UFC 304, Leon Edwards versus Belal Muhammad is a little over a week away. It goes down in Manchester, England on July 27th, and I absolutely love this fight card. I'm going to go through the top 3 reasons that I love UFC 304. I'm going to start with a couple honorable mentions, then I'm going to get into my actual list, going from 3 to 1, 1 being the number 1 reason I am excited for UFC 304. And I already think this fight card is flying crazy under the radar. I already did a video like that. If you care to check that out, I will link it down in the description. But let's start off with my first honorable mention, and that is the time. Unfortunately, this is going to piss a lot of people off, actually. I am hyped. I am excited that it is still catering to the North American audience. I feel horrible for the live fans. I truly do. You have to go there early in the morning and watch the fights live because Dana White and UFC is going to pander to the North American audience where they make the majority of their pay-per-view revenue. But for me, and I know it's only once in a while, I absolutely despise, I absolutely hate when the UFC puts a pay-per-view on or even a fight card on in the middle of the afternoon. First off, it ruins your Saturday. Second off, it just doesn't feel right. And I know, I know there's going to be people from other countries down in the comments saying, I have to watch every pay-per-view at 7 o'clock in the morning or whatever. I get you. I understand. But for me, it just doesn't feel right. Like, you watch the pay-per-view in the middle of the day, you waste your entire day, and then at nighttime, you're like, oh, wait a second. I don't have any fights to watch now? So I am very grateful that I believe the regular, like, main prelims are going to start at 8 p.m. The main card is going to start at 10 p.m. Eastern time. I am grateful for that. Next honorable mention. This is the first pay-per-view in a while, truly in a while, that doesn't feel like it was thrown together last minute. What do I mean by that? You go back, you even look at UFC 297, which was Sean Strickland versus Dricus du Plessis in Canada earlier this year in January. Felt like it was thrown together last second. It truly did. Now, 298 didn't feel like it was thrown together last second. 299, which was Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Chito Vera 2. A little bit because the Dustin Poirier Benoit Saint-Denis thing, but not really. Then 300. It was basically thrown together on like 5 weeks notice, 6 weeks notice for the main event. Just, don't get me wrong, I love the card. I love the card. It was a great card. It absolutely delivered. I thought people were overly complaining about it, but it just felt like it was all thrown together last minute. And then you fast forward a little bit, or you go to 301, which was supposed to be Pereira, ended up not being Pereira, so people were wondering about a main event. That card kind of underdelivered, but that was kind of put together at least on somewhat of a decent time frame. So you have 301, 302, that were all right cards that weren't thrown together last minute. Then you have 303. The Conor McGregor, Michael Chandler debacle, the broken pinky toe, everything's being thrown together. Everything's changing, Diego Lopez, Brian Ortega, Diego Lopez moving up a weight class, Diego Lopez now fighting Dan Ige. I know it was kind of fun. I don't like short notice fights. And then you have Pereira Yuri on short notice. Now Yuri's basically championship hopes are over for at least the time being because he was thrown into that fight on a week's notice. An opportunity of a lifetime, but at the same time, if he fails, he's in a really shitty spot. So this is the first major pay-per-view where the card's really solid, great fights throughout, that feels like it wasn't thrown together last minute. You even look at the Sphere. The Sphere is getting close. I know right now, if it gets announced tomorrow, okay, it wasn't thrown together last minute, but it's getting close. I mean, typically fighters like 10 to 12 week training camp, some of them okay with an 8-week training camp. We're roughly 8 weeks away from the Sphere event. UFC Noche, UFC 306. We still don't have a main event for that yet. So, I'm just getting tired. It just seems like, there's fight night cards that don't have fights. And then a week before, all of a sudden 3 fights are added and they're shuffling stuff around. It just feels everything's really forced nowadays. So I'm very excited that 304 was announced a while ago. The majority of the fights were announced a while ago. Everyone seems like they have a proper training camp. And it seems really put together. I'm super excited for that. One more honorable mention before we actually get into the list, and this is just kind of highlighting 2 fights that I'm not going to talk about throughout the list, and that is Christian Leroy Duncan versus Gregory Rodriguez. This is a banger prelim. It was supposed to be Christian Leroy Duncan versus somebody else originally, versus Robert Brichek. Robert Brichek pulled out. Gregory Rodriguez stepped in. This is a phenomenal middleweight fight. I am really excited for this. Christian Leroy Duncan has shown some promise. Obviously, you know, he lost to Armin Petrosian and kind of, you know, people thought, okay, he's not really that good, even though he looks pretty good. Now he gets a chance, an opportunity to kind of prove himself against an absolute killer in Gregory Rodriguez. I absolutely love that fight. And honestly, just to kind of, you know, lump this in with a few other things, the prelims have a few really fun fights. You know, to be honest, I think there's a lot of fun fights on the prelims. They're not the greatest prelims, but just to highlight a few, and I feel weird even saying this, Molly McCann, she may be kind of a shitty fighter. She always brings it. She's always fun. You have Nathaniel Wood on the prelims as well. He's a very interesting prospect. And obviously you have the Christian Leroy Duncan, Gregory Rodriguez fight. One more fight I want to highlight. It's on the main card. It's not on the prelims, but I'm not really going to talk about it throughout the video, is Arnold Allen Giga Chikadze. I am super excited for that. That is a banger featherweight matchup, super high level. And whoever wins that fight, I know the division's kind of logjam right now, but whoever wins that fight is going to be in a very good position in the featherweight division. So I wanted to highlight mainly those two fights, Christian Leroy Duncan, Gregory Rodriguez, as well as Arnold Allen versus Giga Chikadze. Excellent matchmaking by the UFC and excellent fights made by the UFC on UFC 304. Now let's get into the actual list. We're going to start off with number 3, and that is that we are getting Tom Aspinall versus Curtis Blaydes 2. It sucks that it's for the interim heavyweight championship, but at the end of the day, I don't care. It's unfinished business, in my opinion. I hate, absolutely despise, when a fight ends in controversy, and then for years to come, we have to debate, well, if this wouldn't happen, that wouldn't happen, and this wouldn't happen. You go back to 2022, July 2022. It'll be almost exactly 2 years to the date when they fight in the rematch. They fought. It lasted 15 seconds. Tom Aspinall hurt his knee. He was wheeled out on the world's smallest chair. We don't know what would have happened. We never got to find out. We never got a conclusion to that main event. And I know that Tom Aspinall versus Curtis Blaydes isn't like the sexiest fight or the most hardcore, you know, fight that people want. People want Tom Aspinall versus John Jones. This was a fight that needed to happen at some point in time. We had to get closure on this. I hate when a fight ends in controversy like that. And especially, we didn't get to see much. It's not like we saw a round or two, Blaydes was winning and then Aspinall got injured. We saw 15 seconds, Blaydes landed a couple shots, and then boom, it was over. So we really don't know who was the better fighter. So I'm hyped that they're finally fighting each other again. I'm hyped that it's for a title. To be honest, I think the winner of this fight will potentially be elevated to undisputed champion in their next fight. So you have John Jones, Stipe Miocic potentially in November of this year at Madison Square Garden. So the winner of Tom Aspinall, Curtis Blaydes, if the winner of Jones Stipe retires afterwards, I'm assuming the UFC is just going to elevate the winner of this fight to undisputed champion and then have them take on whoever's next in line, whether it be Cyril Gane if he beats Alexander Volkov, or Jalton Almeida, or whoever it may be next in line. Most likely the winner of Aspinall versus Curtis Blaydes will be elevated to undisputed champion unless John Jones Stipe sticks around, or there's a rematch between those two, or Alex Pereira comes up to heavyweight. That's always possible. But I'm just psyched for this heavyweight matchup because it's two heavyweights that are actually skilled. The heavyweight division is shit, and we're getting closure for that unfinished business from back in 2022 when Tom Aspinall got injured. Moving up on my list, moving up to number 2 reason I love UFC 304. Absolutely love this fight card, and that's because we finally get to find out how good is Paddy Pimblett, as well as how good is Muhammad Mokaev, because we are getting Paddy Pimblett versus Bobby Green, and we are also getting Muhammad Mokaev versus Manel Kape. Two very, very steep tests for both guys. And I love when you have guys who are kind of hyped up. You know, I was going to say a lot of people think are good, but I don't think a lot of people think Paddy Pimblett is good. But I love when you have fights where there's hype around a fighter, and then we finally get to see him truly tested against a really tough test. And Paddy Pimblett, I know a lot of people say he's overrated. I don't think Paddy Pimblett's overrated at all. I think, honestly, and I know people are going to jump down in the comments and be like, what are you talking about? You have to actually think, okay? In my opinion, overrated is the skill of a fighter does not match the perception of a fighter. Paddy Pimblett, I feel like the majority of the fan base says Paddy Pimblett is shit, Paddy Pimblett's horrible, Paddy Pimblett doesn't know how to fight. And I feel like he's not that good. I don't see him as a future lightweight contender. I don't know for sure, but I feel like he's actually better than people are giving him credit for, maybe even myself included into that. But nonetheless, we're finally getting a test. Paddy Pimblett is finally getting tests. We are getting him fighting Bob Green, you know. We're finally getting him against Bob Green. And this is the steepest test to date because he's only fought Tony Ferguson, the dead corpse of Tony Ferguson. He got a robbery win against Jarrett Gordon. He lost that fight against Jarrett Gordon. He beat Jordan Levitt, Rodrigo Vargas, Luigi Vendramini in the UFC. And all those fights he struggled with. So Bob Green is the steepest test of his career because Bob Green is actually a decent fighter. Has some good hands, has some knockout power. You know, ask, what is his name? Grant Dawson. He's still sleeping at the Apex. Ask him. Paddy Pimblett leaves his chin up in the air. Paddy Pimblett's there to be hit. Bobby Green's slick on the feet. Now, I know Paddy Pimblett can incorporate the wrestling, and, you know, Bobby Green's getting up there in age and is starting to slow down a bit, so I think Paddy Pimblett can win this fight. I think this is excellent matchmaking by the UFC, but this is one of those fights, honestly, the word fraud gets thrown around way too much. The word exposed gets thrown around way too much. This is one of those fights, if Paddy Pimblett loses to Bobby Green, we're like, okay, we know now, you know, Paddy Pimblett isn't ever really going to be a contender unless he gets substantially better, but he's not particularly young where he has, you know, it's not like he's 22 years old, where he has, you know, 10 years to hit his prime. You know, we're going to find out at UFC 304 how good is Paddy Pimblett. And for Muhammad Mokaev, talk about a tough test. He's fighting Manel Kape. And Mokaev, he's super young. It's hard to believe he's 23 years old. Now, he's had a little bit more, you know, he's faced a little bit better competition than somebody like Paddy Pimblett. Obviously, they're in different weight classes. He beat Alex Perez in his last fight, Tim Elliott before that. But I think it's a huge step up in competition for Manel Kape, or against Manel Kape, not for Manel Kape, because Mokaev hasn't looked particularly great on the feet. And in some of his fights, it's weird. Mokaev will kind of look like shit and then all of a sudden find a finish. So it just makes up for the performance as a whole. We're going to see him tested against Manel Kape. If he can't get a takedown against Manel Kape, it's going to be a tough night for him on the feet. Or imagine this. Imagine he can't get the takedown. Or imagine he, you know, Kape mixes it in, and or Mokaev mixes it in, Kape works his way back to his feet. Imagine if Mokaev just looks decent on the feet against Kape and mixes in the grappling. It's going to be a very interesting test for Mokaev, and that could be arguably a #1 contender fight. The division, I know we have the new signing of Akaya Sakura, who may be fighting Alexandre Pantoja. But next up is the winner of Mokaev versus Kape. So, very interesting fights. I'm super hyped for him. I'm super hyped to see how good Mokaev really is. I think Kape is really a good measuring stick. And I think for Paddy Pimblett, Bobby Green is a really good measuring stick as well. So, I'm excited to find out how good, you know, two of these guys are that in both their divisions seem like they have a lot of promise. For at least Paddy Pimblett, he's got a lot of hype behind him. You know, the UFC pushing him and promoting him because he's from the UK. And for Mokaev, a lot of people are like, yeah, he looks pretty good. You know, he's one of those Dagestani guys who goes out there and, you know, he's undefeated and he grapples and he finds submissions. I'm very interested to see both these guys tested at UFC 304. Moving on to my #1 reason I absolutely love UFC 304. Before I get into it, comment down below, what do you think my #1 reason is? I'm going to give you a second. Okay, comment down below. Let me know. My #1 reason that I loved UFC 304 is because Belal Muhammad is getting his rightfully earned title shot. It's about time. When we're throwing out undeserved title shot after undeserved title shot after undeserved title shot, it's only justified once in a while a guy gets a deserved title shot. And this is a banger fight. I don't care what anyone says. Oh, they don't have personality. Well, then go watch WWE. Leon Edwards versus Belal Muhammad 2 is a banger fight for so many reasons. For so many reasons. First off, Leon Edwards, 13-fight unbeaten streak. Belal Muhammad, 10-fight unbeaten streak. Belal Muhammad has earned his way to the top. And, you know, it sucks that he had to sit out for basically a year and a half to get his title shot because the UFC gave Colby Covington some Dana White privilege all for him to show up and not fight. But now we're getting Belal Muhammad, who has earned his shot, who we know he's never getting another shot. What is he, 36 years old? If he loses here, he's never getting another shot at the title. And we know his style. And I know a lot of people call it boring. I don't think it's particularly boring. But he's going to go out there and he's going to try to win this fight. He's not going to show up and just shit the bed and then cry injury and cry robbery afterwards. He's going to show up and fight. And I think this is such a great fight stylistically because Leon Edwards almost seems like the worst possible matchup for Belal Muhammad because Leon's slick on the feet. He's accurate on the feet. He has good movement and he has good takedown defense. But in a way, Belal Muhammad is a horrible stylistic matchup for Leon Edwards as well. And I know people are going to say that's crazy, but Belal will move forward. He will eat shots to land shots. He's super durable. He's super well-rounded. And guess what? He will continue to push the pace. And what is Leon Edwards' biggest weakness? When you really push the pace on him, he starts to fade. We've seen him fade in the Colby Covington fight. We've seen him fade even in the Kamaru Usman fights. And I know he got a knockout in the 5th round, so it's not really a knock on him. But what I'm trying to say here is Belal Muhammad has avenues to win this fight. And he is going to go out there and fight like his life is on the line because he knows this is his one opportunity to achieve his lifelong goal. And I absolutely love this matchup. And I love that we're getting an opportunity for a guy who's actually earned it. In a world where, you know, you're getting random thrown together Pereira versus Prohaska on short notice. And you're getting, you know, Israel Adesanya with an undeserved title shot. You're getting Marlon Vera with an undeserved title shot. You're getting Stipe Miocic with an undeserved title shot. You're getting Colby Covington with an undeserved title shot. You're even getting Steve Erceg with an undeserved title shot. I didn't hate that one as much because of the layout of the division at the time. It feels so good. And let me know if anybody else feels the same way. It feels so good that we have a solid card of UFC 304 where it wasn't thrown together last minute. And the main event is two guys who are the elite of the elite who have earned where they are. They've earned their place. And now we get to see them battle it out. And it even has a great storyline. They fought many years ago, back in 2021. We didn't get to see how it was going to play out. There was an eye poke in the 2nd round, early 2nd round. Both guys have gotten exponentially better since then. To sit here and say, like there's people that have said, Leon was winning. It was 1 round. It was 1 round. Leon was winning. It was 1 round. It's not like he dominated. It's not like he was destroying him. Yes, he was winning. It was 1 round. It was a 5-round fight. Imagine if we just gave the belt or never made a fight just because someone wins 1 round off somebody else. How many fights, I would love to know this statistic, how many fights where I want to know how many fights where the fighter that wins the 1st round wins the fight in its entirety. I would love to know that statistic because it doesn't make any sense. And also it was years ago. Both guys have gotten so much better. But I love this card. If the UFC actually, they used to name cards back in the day. This should be called UFC Unfinished Business because you have Leon Edwards, Belal Muhammad 2, which is unfinished business. And you have Tom Aspinall versus Curtis Blaydes 2, which is unfinished business. Both of them, you know, at least in the Curtis Blaydes, or not at least, but in the Curtis Blaydes case, he wins via TKO. But in the Leon Edwards, Belal Muhammad case, you have an eye poke that ends in a no contest. It was only right to make them fight again at some point. And now we're getting it for a title. I am beyond excited for Leon Edwards versus Belal Muhammad 2. I don't care that they don't have WWE personalities and throw out crazy insults. I think this is a banger fight. I think it'll be a fun build-up. Honestly, I think Belal and Leon will go back and forth a little bit. Nothing crazy. That's not my particular cup of tea. But I think some people will enjoy it. And I think you have 2 elite of the elite welterweights actually fighting each other. And I pray whoever wins this fight is actually active in the welterweight division because the welterweight division is really starting to get interesting with names like Jack Della Maddalena, Shavkat Rakhmonov, and Ian Machado Gary. I am beyond hyped for the future of the welterweight division. I am beyond hyped for UFC 304 in this main event. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and thank you so much for watching.